Hello, listeners, and welcome back to A Night in Question. I'm your co-host, Jeremy, and with me today is my co-host, Kate.
Hello, everybody.
And also joining us yet again is my handsome boyfriend, Ted.
Hello, everyone. I am like the Y of the vowels of the host, so I am sometimes.
Or you're. I thought we were supposed to just say why. Then, if you're the why, like why Ted? Why Ted?
Why? Why not?
That's what I when you and Jeremy started dating. That's what I said. Why Ted?
Oh,
Not in a mean way. Not in a mean way. It was the first time he told me about you, but I said, "Why Ted? Why do you like Ted?" Jeremy used to date a lot of people. He very rarely had. Oh God, I'm digging my hole deeper. No,
Here's another shovel.
he never had long-term boyfriends. It's appropriate for the topic of our show. No, but he never had long-term boyfriends. So I was like, why Ted? Why is that? I hadn't met you yet. Now I understand why, because you're lovely.
that's
That
right.
was a good dodge.
There you go. See?
Yeah, it was.
I have my moments.
Yes.
Anyway.
All right. Tensions are escalating between Kate and Ted.
Oh, shush.
Awkward being in this room right now, even though we're all...
I'm not in that room.
We're not even in the same room.
Oh, that's true. You're recording from different rooms and
Yeah,
but at
the
least
echo would
you're in
be-
the same apartment together. I have my cat.
Are you lonely? We know about the cat.
She's adorable and everyone should know about her. She's beautiful. I love her.
How's your murder apartment?
So the stove hasn't turned on spontaneously, so yay!
Yay!
Let's talk about that. That's great. I'm not worried that my place is going to burn down. I can't tell now if I'm just being really paranoid.
Yes, you are.
Thank you for that, Ted.
You're welcome.
What do you mean by that?
So I think some things have been moving. Like, I live by myself, right? I have the cat. She's not that smart. She's not going to move things on my shelves. But I feel like things are moving around. But I also don't know if it's all in my head, because now I'm thinking about it and I'm looking for reasons that my home is haunted. So I don't know. It might just be me being paranoid. But nobody else is coming in here. Like, not even my super is coming in here right now. Like, the other day I got home, I had gone to the grocery store, and some of my figurines were on a different shelf than they normally are.
That's strange.
Right? Okay, that's strange, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Are you like a real life Annie Wilkes and you've got like a writer stashed somewhere, and so every time you leave, he goes through and like rearranges your mini like knickerbockers or whatever?
Oh, I mean, listen, it's been a while since I've had a boyfriend, but not that long. I don't need to keep one who I've like removed their feet yet.
oh, the murder apartment is getting into your bones.
It's just, I don't know. It's I maybe I need to start taking pictures of how I leave everything, but or maybe it is the cat, but I don't know how she could move something from one shelf to another.
Yeah.
Like, if stuff was just on the floor, that would make sense to me. But like something actually moving?
And you're not a sleepwalker, right? Like, not something you could be doing in your sleep.
No, I've never been a sleepwalker. Like, I don't know. I think maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe quarantine is getting to me. Maybe the lack of seeing people, hint, hint, is getting to me.
I would if I could. I'm not allowed. I'm a prisoner. Help me. Send help.
I mean, I suppose it's possible. When I was cleaning, maybe I moved them and it didn't occur to me.
Well, there was one time Jeremy was cleaning the kitchen and
Jeremy was cleaning the kitchen?
I know.
know.
Like, that in and of itself was epic. But I came home after he had cleaned the kitchen and I had a pitcher of apple juice that was no longer in the fridge. And I couldn't find the pitcher even. Like, I first I was kind of pissed. I was like, did you dump this out? And he was like, no, I didn't dump anything out. I just cleaned everything. And so I couldn't find the apple juice. And then I went to make myself some dinner and the pitcher of apple juice was stashed with the plates.
What?
So I guess in the hurry, Jeremy just like put the apple juice maybe with the plates. So it was lukewarm, so I had to put some ice in it. But that kind of stuff happens all the time.
Well, it's like when you leave your keys in like the freezer or something. I mean, it's the, there's things we do without really thinking about it. So I'm trying to think what's the more likely scenario. The most rational thing is that I was cleaning and I moved them and I didn't think about it and I didn't move them back and then I just didn't really notice. And I know that, but then sometimes late at night what I'm thinking is that somebody was murdered in my apartment and the vengeful ghost, or for all I know the body is still in here. Because they never found the body, which we're going to be talking a little bit about. But
All right, Nancy Grace.
you don't have to live in a murder apartment, okay? Sometimes it gets to me.
All right. Should we do a little recap of what we talked about last week?
Oh, yeah, that's probably a good idea.
All right. So last week, we continued to dive into the story of Paul and Abby Stone. They were a young couple living in Seattle with their young son, Dylan. We were continuing our discussion from episode 1, where we dove into the backstory of the couple, and last week we covered that very night in question.
Where we last left off with Paul, the police discovered him in his apartment with a whole lot of blood and no Abby.
But the blood was proven to be Abby's.
The blood was tested, yes. And there was a lot of blood. Enough blood that, in theory, no one should have survived that. In theory. And I say in theory because without a body, it is hard to prove murder. That did play into why Paul was given the deal he was given. So, Paul was facing life in prison, but I think on both sides, they knew there were some problems with the case because Paul is maintaining he's innocent. And even though there was a lot of blood, there was no body. And it is hard to convict somebody when you don't have a body. Not impossible. We've done it before in the state of Washington, but it is a lot easier when you have, an actual murdered person. So they made a deal with Paul. He was given an option of a 20-year sentence with the possibility of early parole for good behavior. So he was released in 2015. But what's strange is that nobody knows where he is since then.
We don't know where Paul is. Paul has disappeared. But Paul, if you're listening, we would love to talk to you.
Oh, we would love to talk to you.
So well, please.
And he has to, he I don't know how long his parole would have lasted. I'll have to look into that. But at least immediately, he would have been meeting with a parole officer. So he's not disappeared in that he broke parole. We just have found no trace of him. There's not sightings. There's not an internet presence. So I don't know. We'll have to keep looking. But for our listeners, if any of you, you've seen his picture. If any of you think that you've seen Paul, he'd probably still be living somewhere in the area. Hit us up.
Yeah, let us know. But Dylan, the couple's son, was raised by Abby's sister. There's some evidence that Dylan, understandably, never really adjusted to life without his parents and through the awful ordeal that he had to suffer. And I guess there were escalating behavior issues for Dylan all through high school. And as soon as he turned 18, he took off and his Aunt Jennifer lost all contact with him. So we don't know where Dylan really is either.
It's weirder to me that we don't have a presence for him. Paul, I get it. He was in prison for, 20 years or whatever. And it's not like he wants to set up a Facebook account when he first leaves prison. But Dylan is of a generation that you would think have some kind of presence on the internet.
Exactly, unless he's under some kind of pseudonym,
Yeah, I suppose that's a logical thing to assume.
And that would make sense because if you're the child of a couple that's had something like this happened, like that's a story that's going to stick with you.
Yeah.
And so there would be, at least for myself, if I had this in my past, I would be pretty loath to put myself in a situation that puts me in kind of any real public eye. And let's face it, social media has put everybody in the public eye. And so I and there was actually a lot of crazy rumors from the get-go. I mean, as soon as it happened, the rumor mills were just going wild.
And thank you, Ted. That brings us to this week's topic: conspiracy theories. So, in the course of Kate's crazy, diligent, but absolutely crazy research, she came across a website that somebody built right around the time of the murder.
Yeah. So it took a while to find this too. It's buried in the deep, deep depths of the catacombs of like ancient internet that back when we were calling it the interweb. I don't think it's even been updated since the late 90s. But it was all about the murders, and not just the murders. It is full of these just bonkers conspiracy theories.
And I love these. I cannot wait to dive into these because some of these are just off the wall.
Some of these, I feel like I'm being punked that somebody actually thought this was a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, you do see it across so many cases. I'm surprised that we didn't see more about aliens. That seems to typically be.
I'm actually
go-to.
frankly disappointed that it was the 90s. Aliens, like X-Files, man, there should have been some alien theories up the wazoo, but no.
Maybe like a Bigfoot.
Bigfoot, Sasquatch did it!
Pacific Northwest.
Sasquatch.
Sounds right.
Sam Squanch.
So, between this website, our own research, and my darling Ted, we have a treasure trove of strange, wild stories to tell you today. Theory number 1, drug massacre / frame up.
Well, and actually, like, out of all of the ones that we have pulled, this is the one that was sort of the most deeply embedded in the rumor mill. Even at my school, there were conversations happening that were along the lines of this theory. There, I can't remember specifically who saw the apartment first in terms of like after the police came out of there, but there were claims that somebody at my high school had actually seen the apartment, and he had even like there were already rumors about Paul bringing in some tough looking guys from Mexico, which I'm like, if it was at night, how could you really identify ethnicity? But okay. And that they were doing coke off of women's body parts. I mean, there was like insane stuff. And so it turned into this big rumor that Paul owed a bunch of money to some kind of like cartel. And basically they killed Abby and framed him, and basically were going to kill his son. And again, the whole like, if this happened at night, how could you really pull that information? But that was the biggest thing, was because Paul, it was well known that Paul was dealing with drugs, and so that never really left the narrative, at least the conversations that were happening with my friends and stuff. And so it does kind of make sense as far as like that there could be some kind of drug thing gone wrong. I'm not entirely sure about this whole like Mexican orgy doing coke off of women's body parts. So like that.
I mean, how do you know for sure that it was nonsense?
Well, we do have there was a person who lived in that building who would have reported that.
Here we go. Who was it, Ted? Who was it?
Not Marcia, but
Cindy.
It was totally Cindy, that bitch.
It's because she's a tattletale.
She is a little tattletale.
Yeah. No, it was Jan. It was our friend Jan.
Shocking.
Oh,
Good old Jan.
Sure, Jan.
And
I mean, but you do like I'm surprised that the police weren't using her as an official informant for the neighborhood, just given how much she seemed to be up in everybody's business. Like they probably
real.
would have solved a lot more cases if they just went to her first. She seems to have known everything.
Seriously.
Secret
She'd be
Agent
like a
Jan.
star witness.
Secret Agent Jan. I love it.
So, next theory. Theory number 2. The Grunge Slayer.
The Grunge Slayer. I love this
Grunge
one.
Slayer.
Okay.
Was her name Buffy?
Oh, I wish.
That would have been epic.
Oh, I love me some Buffy.
Well, but no, I actually really I adore this theory because it's a serial killer you have probably not heard of. It never really made the news. This is the same time you had like the Green River Killer and the Tube Sock Killer and all of them. So it was a theory. I'm going to like underline, emphasize, star, highlight the word theory. That there was another killer stalking the Pacific Northwest. And like, if any of you are familiar with the whole smiley face killer thing, where it's this big conspiracy theory about a group of killers who were drowning young men and leaving smiley faces at the scene of the crimes, we don't actually know that this killer exists. Most of this was fueled by Kurt Cobain's death. Because Kurt Cobain died just around the same time.
A year before, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like, if you want to talk conspiracy theories, it's, especially in the Pacific Northwest, everyone has one about Kurt Cobain. You can spend a very long time going down these rabbit holes.
Do you think Courtney Love could have killed Abby Stone?
I think Courtney definitely killed Abby Stone.
Yeah.
It was definitely Courtney did it. But with you have the rise of the grunge music, the rise of the grunge music.
How old are you?
The grunge.
I feel
you
older
had the
every
grunge
day.
music?
The grunge. I'm like Jancy. It's the grunge music. Those kids with their grunge. There were notable deaths in the 90s. And it kind of became a thing. It became fashionable to like connect these deaths so that they were all part of some big scheme, which is how the Grunge Slayer was born. And this is the kind of thing you'd see on early internet message boards, like pre-Reddit, no one ever really took it that seriously, but I do believe it showed up on public access here a couple times with some of the other conspiracy theories. And there were stories going around that even though Paul was, not a star, their band was not well known, he became a target of the Grunge Slayer, and that he was the original intended victim of the Grunge Slayer. But because of his schedule being erratic and because he had stormed out, the Slayer got there to kill Paul, but Paul's not there, so he killed Abby instead.
Well, and what's really interesting about that particular theory is I've also heard that that maybe there were some band members possibly involved, because if Paul had been the one killed, it could have generated enough publicity for them to then have enough notoriety where they could get a new singer or get a new replacement and use that notoriety to book more gigs.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
That's a great theory.
Well, because that is a way to. It was actually one of the theories too with Kurt Cobain. One of the motivations is that he had made it pretty common knowledge he wanted to leave Nirvana, and so what's the best way to continue to sell records? Kill off the lead singer. Everything's going to go top of the charts.
Yep.
So it is a great. I don't want to say great. That makes it sound like I'm endorsing it, but it's
effective.
It's effective. Yes, thank you. Effective. It's a very effective way to bring attention to yourself. And I do want to point out that, Paul was with a woman who may or may not have been his band member before he was back at home and, discovering the body. I don't know, or the body, discovering everything that had happened with Abby. Although I do wonder with our whole Grunge Slayer, he was still adamant that, he got home and Abby was trying to hurt Dylan. He doesn't talk about anyone else being there. So did Abby get confused? Did Abby get killed like in those few minutes he was gone with Dylan? Did the Grunge Slayers slip in? I mean, I guess I don't see how in any way this is a conceivable thing to have happened.
Well, also, if there was a grunge slayer throughout Seattle or the Pacific Northwest during the 90s, so many of these 90s grunge stars died in such different ways. So you don't have like a typical serial killer MO.
True, but you could make the argument. I mean, you have a serial killer like Israel Keyes, who was actually possibly in the area too. He did live in Washington for a stretch, and his whole MO was the randomness of a lot of the killings. He killed people in different ways. He killed people who had, different demographics, different. There wasn't a type. He killed for opportunity and because he wanted to.
But was it typically with a gun or a knife? Or...
It varied.
Oh,
And
really?
the thing is that they only ever found one of the bodies of the people he killed. So there's no crime scenes because he was very good at hiding them. But there were other murders happening. I mean, again, you had Mia Zapata, who was murdered in 1993, and she was another member of a Seattle punk band, a grunge band. I mean, I don't think this. That's not to say I think that this theory is valid. I just.
Well, and the other part of this too is the only record we have of Paul speaking about those events are what he said to the cops that night. There was no trial because he took a plea bargain, so he didn't have a chance to testify in court in terms of creating that official record. Therefore, his state of mind was never explored either. We do know that he was using. He did have a drug problem, a drug and alcohol problem. We don't know whether or not those effects were affecting him that night. I mean, he could have very well been super high. He could have been passed out, or he could have been trying to quit stone cold, which also can lead to some ramifications, because if you do get yourself off of drugs, off of anything, there's also things that affect you when you do the cold turkey situation. And so that whole thing has never been able to be examined. And so all we have are Paul's words when he spoke to the cops. And there we have to also question that perspective, because all we have are those words from somebody who has a history of doing mind-altering things to himself.
So, all of these theories are interesting, but the problem is Abby's body was never found. So, it's hard to actually validate any of them. One theory we found from this website is that Jennifer actually helped Abby fake her death to get away from Paul and his abusiveness. There were apparently sightings of Abby in LA. Of course
there was.
I know, right? Like Elvis. She's like Elvis. Good old Abby's like Elvis. Oh. And of course her hair was a different color, and sometimes she was a bit taller, a bit older, thinner, blah, 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 blah. But it was enough to shape the theory that Abby reinvented herself as an actress or singer or a waitress, for all we know, in LA, while Jennifer raised Dylan. And once he was old enough, he left to be reunited with his mother.
Which, if I'm trying to start new life and hide my identity, you know what I don't do? Become an actress or a model and move to LA.
Yes, right? Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. No, she was a smart woman. Let's say she faked her death. Sure. Let's say she faked her death. Let's say the drug cartels were coming after them and Abby decided to get her and her son away. She faked her death. I don't buy that she would give up her son.
No, especially when she went so ballistic when he was
Mhm.
missing that day that Paul left a note. She
loved
clearly
Dylan too much.
cared.
Yeah, she loved Dylan too much. Thank you,
Yeah,
Ted.
she wouldn't give him up on purpose.
Like,
Right.
I could see her taking him and leaving. She had done that before.
Yeah.
And I could see her really doing it, taking him, leaving, moving back with her parents, moving to another state, changing their names. I don't see her letting her sister raise Dylan while she's out there. That just doesn't match with any of the facts of what we know about her.
Plus,
and then
go ahead, Ted.
I was just going to say, and that also puts Jennifer on the hook either way too, because then you have to ask, did Abby just fake her death and not tell Jennifer and then somehow communicated to Dylan to come and find her? Or was Jennifer then in on it? And then all of a sudden the conspiracy gets a little bigger because now we have this woman raising this little boy, convinced that his father may have likely killed his mother. And then, oh, you're 18. By the way, here's your mom's number.
It doesn't track. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, I think if there's one thing we can agree upon, and I did read one of the conspiracy theories that said that, because we come back to the blood. There was so much blood. How could she have lived without all this blood? And one
That
of the
was going to
theories,
be my point.
well, one of the theories, this is an absolute bonkers one, but that she had been planning this for so long, she was getting blood drawn, like a pint at a time or whatever, to save up so she could fake her death. So she was having blood slowly drawn that she was keeping and storing so that the night of, she could just dump it all around and it would look like she'd lost too much blood, but really she'd been planning this for months.
I'm sorry, but like the mental image of like a mom with her kid just like, Daddy's coming home soon. Help me spray down the apartment like on a
Right?
like a twisted Nickelodeon show.
No, again, it's a ridiculous theory. And also, so where was she storing this blood? In their freezer? In the top shelf behind the beer? Like, you don't... That's not a thing. You have to store it somewhere cold. You can't be just keeping rancid blood around. And, you could, but then it's going to be old blood. But, like, I know he was a little oblivious. He wasn't that oblivious.
Yeah,
you'd see bags of dried blood.
I would think so. It's an interesting theory. Just if I was going to fake my own death, sure, that's a good thing to do. I would, draw blood out so it would look like I had died. But no, sorry, people,
no. So an even more bonkers theory was that the whole family just faked the whole thing to escape the drug cartels, and that Paul joined them after he got out of prison. Which, come on, he's gonna go away for years.
20 years, when they don't know that a plea deal is going to be offered. They could have thrown the death penalty on the table.
Yeah.
Well, and can you imagine like the setting up of that plan? Like, okay, sweetie, so here's the plan. You're gonna do 20 years. I'm going to go to LA, right? That's our fair and equitable plan based off of our marriage.
I could say, her being like, whatever, you got us into this mess, you can deal with it. Like, that's legit. That's legit.
Yeah.
I would understand that. But no, there's so many variables there. There's so many ways that could go wrong. There's no way. I'm sorry. There's no way. That's just too ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I think the more reasonable explanation, or at least one of them, that we've been kind of thinking about and talking about, is that Paul manipulated the timeline, that he did actually murder Abby during the day and then got rid of her body during kind of that weird kind of no man's land time, and then kind of staged the fight to bring a lot of attention so that it would place a later sort of disappearance / time of death before the cops would get involved. And then ran to the neighbor.
Well, but then, I could buy that, definitely. But then why leave all the blood? Like, you're still going to think that she's dead.
Yeah, well, but I think kind of, if you're thinking a little, I think when somebody's murdered, the first person we're going to look at is who are they closest to? Who are the people closest to him or to her? And so I think if we're going along with this manipulated timeline theory, I'm sure he would know that he's not going to get away with it. Like, he's going to be a prime suspect in her disappearance no matter what. And so it could have just been like, okay, well, I know I'm going to go down for this either way. And so I'm going to just try to kind of play the system to get the best sort of deal possible, by not letting there be a body.
Well, that's interesting, and it does kind of also bring in that whole theory that he had an accomplice for
Yes.
disposing of the body, and who possibly then maybe even helped him stage the fight. Kind of a Robert Durst scenario. I do still think, though, it's a little weird if he was going to go through all this trouble to essentially still get arrested. Like, why not try to run for it? But I don't know. I mean, again, we had that woman, maybe, and if it was Maureen,
I
if
was
it was
gonna
his
say.
bandmate, maybe he wanted to be there for her.
Yeah, I mean, right before this happened, he was at a bar with a
Right.
mysterious woman. Like, and that has never been cleared up who that is. If that's Maureen, if it's someone completely different, we don't know. But it is suspicious in the timeline.
It is suspicious in the time. Well, and if it was Maureen, I mean, she obviously would have been questioned, but I didn't find anyone, or at least in any of the articles I read, like, I saw some quotes from band members, not a whole lot, honestly, from the band, but was she ever specifically asked if she was who he was with? Is that something the police did but never released? Is that something she publicly has ever talked about? I would be interested in talking to her directly, actually, which we'll try to make happen. That would be great.
Yeah.
Could it have been someone else in the building?
Like your special friend Zach.
Oh, handsome Zach. We extolled his virtues last episode. Hope you
Listen,
never hear this, Zach.
I would still like light bulbs to be fixed when they go out, so I'm not going to say anything. There's no way. He fixes my plumbing in such a timely manner.
Again,
There's no way.
jokes.
There's no way. Maybe it was Jan. Hey, maybe it was Jan.
No, Jan is like, she broadcasts the news. She never really was the news.
Or so you think. That's why she's so good at it.
No, there's no way. I mean, she didn't have the upper body strength to handle a dead body. I mean, that would be...
You've got to lift with your legs, you know?
I mean, I'm going to say...
Maybe if you were there to give her lessons on how to lift properly, then it makes it more likely, but no. I don't think... I really... No, the police didn't even question her as far as like beyond just what she already volunteered. And
of course she did.
There was, because she always had the dirt on everybody. But again, she was more interested in communicating the news rather than actually making, because she never started anything.
Right.
Like she was never an instigator. And
she passed on.
Yeah. Well, and again, everything that she said, as far as I know, always checked out as the truth. So it was never like she never even offered like who she think did it. She was like, you have Paul, there's the blood. Like, she was never a malicious person, even in her news delivery. So, and again, she never inserted herself into the situation. She just really liked being the one to report it.
Right.
Well, but I mean, it makes her the perfect criminal then. You know, she knew everyone's business. She had her hands in everything.
Yeah, but then there's lack of motive. Like, what would be Jan's motive?
I said it before. She was the neighbor from hell. I'm keeping my eye on Jan.
Who's probably dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jan,
probably.
May you rest
in peace.
But I mean, the thing is that, you know, I'm wondering now, like, where is that body?
Why get rid of the body outside of with all that blood? Why get rid of the body? What's the point? And how? How do you do it?
Because you're planning on hiding a lot of bodies there?
Yes, I am.
Well, I mean, you're in the apartment now. Where would you hide the body?
Well, the closets are way too narrow. I checked. I've measured them out.
For a body?
For a body, of course. Yeah, totally. When are you two coming over for dinner again? Just asking for a
I'm
friend.
good. I'm all set.
You sure? You sure?
Thanks so much. Yep.
Well, no, but okay. So in all seriousness, the police are going to be coming in. So even though the closets are quite small, I was making a little bit of a jest when I said that. But the police are going to look in the closets, right? So you can't just toss a body in the closet. The air vents are too small, unless you were putting pieces in there. But they'd have to be pretty small pieces, and that's going to take time to dismember a body. There's apartments above and below, so it's like you can't stash something in the floorboards and the ceiling. One of my windows looks out into the alley, so I guess you could have tossed the body out. But again, unless you have an accomplice who is down there and then disposing of the body from there. And there was no sign, at least none of the police reports talked about finding any bloodstains elsewhere, none on the windowsill, none in the alleyway. Tossing a body that was bleeding that profusely out a window is going to leave a sign somewhere.
And the police didn't find any of that in the alley.
No, nothing. And there was no witnesses that, I mean, granted, it was very late in the evening, but it would have left blood somewhere, even a drop of blood somewhere, if you tossed a body out a window.
But what about roof access?
Well, there's a staircase, which is down the hall. But it means carrying a body past Jan's door, past 6 or 7 doors, and hoping it doesn't bleed everywhere.
Yeah. And then what happens once the body's on the roof? Do you have a helicopter come in to take it away, or
well, again, yeah. And there's no great way down from the roof outside of the stairwell. We don't have an outside fire escape or anything. And you come back to no blood was found anywhere else. All of the blood that was found was in the apartment.
Yeah. It's the mystery that keeps on giving.
It's the Christmas mystery.
The Christmas mystery.
Mystery.
So as we continue to do our deep dive into this case and research all the other crazy theories out there, we're hopeful that maybe next week's guest might be able to shed a little bit more light than what we've got so far.
That's right. I have a friend who lived in the building. His name was Bobby Linden, and he was living at the building at the time, and I think I may have just convinced him to have some things to share about that.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yes.
Nancy Drew Ted is on the case.
Nancy Drew Ted. Thank you, Nancy Drew Ted. Are we sure he didn't put the body in his apartment? Just making sure. That's not something that could have happened.
Bobby didn't have upper body strength either. Okay. I always beat him at arm wrestling.
Not to brag or anything. When I was 14, I always beat him in arm wrestling. Well, this was a lot of fun. Well, I miss you, Kate. I wish we could see each other soon.
Me too.
It's called FaceTime.
I know, but it's not the same as in person.
It's not the same. And I'm talking to the cat more than is probably healthy or normal.
Yeah.
Well, tell you what, Jeremy, I'll take some pillows and arrange them on the couch in like a rough shape of Kate. And then you can stick your phone right where the face would be. And then we can just pretend that Kate is in the living room.
You're a giver.
This sounds like a weird sex game, Ted.
Oh, dear.
And on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining us on A Night in Question. Thanks for listening. Visit us on Facebook at A Night in Question and sign up for our newsletter for previews of upcoming episodes and exclusive updates.